Wake the hell up. All right, Britain, let's not pussyfoot around it. Our so-called higher education system is strangling a generation while pretending to be enlightened. Tuition fees aren't education investment. They're a tax on ambition, a death sentence for dreaming, and a disgrace on a country that once led the world in public education. You want social mobility? You want a competitive future? Then we have to say it loud and clear: British people should not be charged for university. It should be free, no fees, no loans, no penalties. The current system is broken, not needing tweaks. Let's get this straight. Since 1998, UK students have been saddled with what's basically modern debt servitude, £9, 250 per year, just for the privilege of attending a university that should be public infrastructure. Then you graduate into job markets that often offer part-time gig work with zero security. That's not progress. That's economic hazing. And guess what? The British political class is still botching it. Chancellor Rachel Reeves just froze the repayment threshold, meaning graduates are now paying more than they borrowed because inflation chowchawed the original terms. That's not a loan system, it's a tax disguised as debt. We are letting politicians pretend student debt is normal when it's actually a policy choice that traps young people before they've even started their lives. We pay taxes for education, but graduates get shortchanged. Here's the hypocrisy: a large chunk of UK taxes is already supposed to fund universities. Yet students are still hammered with sky-high fees and mountains of loans. Why? Because the national discussion has been hijacked by accountants who call it sustainable funding and balancing budgets. Meanwhile, students are balancing wages, rent, mental health issues, and existential dread. In every other modern society that actually cares about its workforce, Germany, Norway, Sweden, higher education is free or heavily subsidized for citizens. Those countries don't bankrupt people for learning, they harness knowledge for national advantage. If we want to be a global competitor in science, tech, healthcare, and culture, we can't extract 60 to 100k from bright young adults before they contribute a single day of work. Student debt is a crisis, but no one talks about it realistically. Student loans were never meant to be debt sentences for life. The original idea was pay as you earn, then clear after a long span. But reality is far uglier. With frozen thresholds and interest piling up, graduates end up paying more than they borrowed over decades. That's not education finance, that's predation. The real scandal isn't only the cost of tuition. It's that Britain's next generation will never recover financially, while older generations who got free or cheap university have decades of equity and advantage. Let me translate that into plain English. Young Brits are subsidizing everyone else's status quo through a rigged funding system that punishes them for trying to get ahead. That is not fair, that is not smart. That is not how countries that want thriving futures behave. Free education is not an expensive luxury, it's a social investment. Here's a radical idea. What if education wasn't a cash cow for bureaucrats and administrators? What if it was treated like infrastructure, like healthcare, like transport, like clean water? Because in reality, a free university system builds a smarter workforce. That workforce pays higher taxes over a longer lifetime. They are more productive, more innovative, more resilient. They pay less in social support because they earn better wages. Countries that did invest in free higher education didn't do it out of kindness. They did it because a smarter population equals a stronger economy. Meanwhile, the current UK model uses education as a barrier rather than a bridge. The argument against free university is baseless. Every time someone tries to justify fees, they trot out the same lines. It funds universities. It keeps quality high. Students should have skin in the game. Bullshit. Universities get government funding already. Cutting fees doesn't destroy them, it forces priorities back toward teaching, research, and public service instead of corporate partnerships and property perks. Quality isn't about fees, it's about curriculum, professors, funding for research, and meaningful investment, all of which don't depend on forcing students into debt. Skin in the game, let me translate that. We want students to be financially pressured so they behave like obedient consumers. That's not education, it's early capitalism boot camp. Free university makes economic sense. Think about this. Britain loses billions in potential long-term tax revenue because new graduates are stuck servicing debt instead of spending, saving, and contributing. Meanwhile, universities rely on international fees to make up shortfalls, creating weird market distortions where foreign students subsidize British education. That's upside-down economics, and it's unsustainable. Free education doesn't cost the economy, expensive debt does. Universities aren't suffering financially because they're smart, they're monopolies. Ask yourself, why are universities always whining about funding? Not because education is expensive, but because they have monopoly power, control over credential scarcity, and leverage over public funds. The fee system doesn't elevate universities, it shields them from financial accountability. If universities had to operate without predatory fees, they might actually innovate, focus on teaching quality, and engage with students as partners instead of revenue sources. The next generation is losing faith in the system, and here's the political canary in the coal mine. Young people aren't angry because they're spoiled. They're angry because they saw a system rigged against them from birth. They saw students graduating with massive debt, no feasible path to owning a home, wages that barely budge while living costs skyrocket. Politicians saying tough luck like it's a policy position. This is not a minor grievance, it's a generational betrayal. Free university empowers diversity, equality, and social mobility. The truth the elites don't want to acknowledge is this: fees disproportionately punish the poorest and the most talented. If tuition is free, lower income students can attend without fear. Brilliant minds aren't filtered out by bank balance. Innovation becomes more democratic. Society becomes more just. Education should expand opportunity, not function as a gatekeeping toll booth. Countries with free higher education have wider participation from low-income and marginalized groups. That's real equality, not some PR campaign. Politicians can stop this, but they choose not to. And here's the bitter pill: this isn't a technical problem, it's a political choice. Every year without free university is a year where policymakers decided that debt is fine, that burdening a generation is acceptable, that making education a consumer product is better than treating it like a public good. This isn't accidental. This isn't complex economics. This is willful policy that prioritizes budgets over people. And it must end. Free university for British people is not a luxury, an unrealistic dream, too expensive. Free education is a social investment, a moral imperative, economically sound, a path to fairness and innovation. We should not be charged to learn. We should be free to build. We should be free to contribute. We should be free to thrive. No fees, no loans, no barriers. Free university for British people, period. This is a national security issue, not a student problem. Let's drop the polite language for a second. Charging British people for university isn't just unfair. It's strategically stupid, because nations don't compete in the 21st century with vibes or nostalgia. They compete with brains. And right now Britain is actively discouraging its own people from developing theirs. Every student who decides not to go to university because of debt fear isn't just a personal loss. It's a national failure. That's one less. Engineer, scientist, doctor, teacher, systems designer, policy thinker, researcher, innovator. While other countries are subsidizing education to hoover up talent, Britain is saying, pay first, worry about your life later. That's not how serious countries behave. Debt makes people risk-averse, and that kills innovation. Here's something no one says plainly enough: student debt makes people cautious. Cautious people don't start businesses, take creative risks, innovate, challenge institutions, or push boundaries. They cling to safe jobs, avoid instability, and stay quiet because missing one paycheck could wreck them. So when politicians wonder why Britain isn't producing enough startups, enough breakthroughs, enough bold thinkers, the answer is obvious: you trained a generation to be afraid. Free university doesn't just educate minds, it frees behavior. People who aren't shackled by debt are more likely to create, experiment, fail, try again, and contribute something genuinely new. Debt doesn't discipline ambition, it domesticates it. The graduate tax argument is a smokescreen. You'll hear this one a lot. Student loans are basically a graduate tax. No, they're not. A real tax is transparent, progressive, collectively shared, and democratically accountable. Student loans are opaque, interest-loaded, psychologically crushing, and individualized. A graduate tax would mean everyone benefits from education, and everyone contributes fairly over time. What we have now is a system where individuals shoulder the burden while the country reaps the reward. That's not taxation, that's outsourcing responsibility. If we're honest, we already believe in collective funding. We just refuse to apply it to young people because they don't vote in large enough numbers yet. The moral test Britain is failing. Every society eventually faces a question that exposes what it really values. Ours is simple. Do you believe education is a right or a product? If it's a product, then fine. Charge for it. Market it. Package it. Sell it like a subscription service. But if it's a right, then charging British citizens for access to it is indefensible. You cannot say we value education while monetizing it like a luxury add-on. You cannot say we care about young people while saddling them with decades of debt before they've lived. And you cannot say we want a fair society while using price as the gatekeeper to knowledge. At some point, the contradiction collapses under its own weight. History will not be kind about this. Here's the part future generations will judge harshly. There was a moment when Britain could have chosen to invest in its people. It had the data, it had the examples from other countries, it had the wealth, and instead it chose to monetize learning and call it responsibility. When people look back at this era, they won't say, well, the spreadsheets made sense. They'll say, how did they let education become a debt trap? And the answer will be uncomfortable, because it was easier to charge students than to confront political cowardice. Say it plain, free university isn't radical. Charging people to learn is. Free education is how confident nations behave. Fees are what insecure systems use to maintain control. So let's stop dancing around it. If Britain is serious about fairness, growth, innovation, stability, and its future, then there is only one honest position. British people should not be charged for university. It should be free. Not someday, not when budgets allow. Now. Not right, not left, just real,